Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry when the phone rang, shattering the suffocating silence of the penthouse like a gunshot. Elias stared at the sleek, black device vibrating against the mahogany desk, the caller ID flashing St. Jude's Trauma Center, and for a split second, he wished he hadn't answered. But he did. And in the span of a single, trembling breath, the liberation he had fought 3 years to achieve, the escape from the golden cage of the Vane family legacy, was incinerated. Julian Vane, the tyrant of the corporate world, the husband who had turned Elias's life into a frozen wasteland of neglect and psychological warfare, had driven his Aston Martin off the cliffs of the coastal highway. He was alive. But the man who woke up in that hospital bed wasn't the monster Elias had divorced an hour ago. The sterile scent of antiseptic was heavy in the air, a sharp contrast to the metallic tang of blood that still lingered on Julian's torn dress shirt, now discarded in the corner of the VIP suite. Elias stood at the foot of the bed, his knuckles white as he gripped the metal railing. He was wearing his coat, ready to leave, ready to board a plane to Zurich and never look back. But Julian's eyes opened. They were the same eyes, obsidian, framed by sharp, aristocratic brows, possessing a depth that could drown a man. Usually, those eyes looked at Elias with cold indifference or calculating disdain. Tonight, however, as they fluttered open and focused on Elias's pale face, they softened. The jagged edges of the man who had made Elias weep himself to sleep for years smoothed out into something terrifyingly familiar. "Eli," Julian croaked, his voice raspy from the intubation tube that had just been removed. He tried to reach out, his hands shaking, wires trailing from his wrist. Why are you crying, my love?" Elias felt the blood drain from his face. My love. Julian hadn't called him that in 5 years. Not since before the merger. Not since before Julian became the CEO and let the power rot his soul. The doctor, a gray-haired specialist named Dr. Eris, stepped forward, guiding Elias to the corner of the room with a firm grip. "Mr. Thorne," he whispered, his tone grave. "Mr. Vane has suffered significant trauma to the temporal lobe. He is experiencing retrograde amnesia. Based on his initial responses, he believes it is 5 years ago. He believes you are newlyweds. Tell him," Elias hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and panic. "Tell him we are divorced. Tell him I hate him." "We cannot," Dr. Eris interrupted, glancing nervously at the heart monitor. "His intracranial pressure is unstable. Any severe emotional shock could cause a hemorrhage. It could kill him, Mr. Thorne. You are the only anchor to his reality right now. You must play the part." Elias looked back at the bed. Julian was watching him with a confused, puppy-like adoration, a ghost of the man Elias had once worshipped. The monster was gone, replaced by the memory of a lover. And Elias realized with a sinking horror that he was trapped. The divorce papers were signed, but legally, until they were filed, he was still Julian Vane's husband. And if he walked away now, he would be the man who killed Julian Vane. The return to the Vane estate was a surreal nightmare. The mansion, a sprawling architectural marvel of glass and steel perched on the city's edge, had been a prison for Elias. Now it was a stage. Julian was confined to a wheelchair for the first few weeks, his leg cast in plaster, his ribs taped. Elias pushed him through the grand foyer, the wheels humming softly on the marble. The staff, usually terrified of their master, watched in bewildered silence as Julian reached up and squeezed Elias's hand, resting on the handle of the chair. "I missed this house," Julian murmured, looking around with bright eyes. "But I missed you more. The hospital. It felt like I was away from you for a lifetime." Elias swallowed the bile rising in his throat. "It was only a few days, Julian." "It felt like years," Julian insisted. He turned his head, pressing a kiss to Elias's knuckles. "Take me to our room? I'm exhausted." Our room. For the last 3 years, they had slept in separate wings of the mansion. Elias had the blue room, a sanctuary of solitude, while Julian occupied the master suite, a cold, gray fortress where business calls took precedence over intimacy. "I had the staff prepare the blue room for you." Elias lied smoothly, though his heart hammered against his ribs. The master suite has stairs. It's better for your recovery to be on the first floor. Julian frowned, a flicker of the old sharpness appearing before vanishing. Separate rooms? But I want to be with you. I need you close, Eli. Doctor's orders, Elias said, his voice clipped. You move too much in your sleep. You need to heal. He deposited Julian in the guest suite, fleeing the room as soon as the nurses took over. He collapsed in the hallway, sliding down the wall until his forehead rested on his knees. This was torture. It was a specific, cruel brand of hell designed to peel back the scabs on his heart. Because the tragedy wasn't that Julian had forgotten the bad years. The tragedy was that Julian remembered the love that Elias had tried so desperately to kill. Weeks bled into a month. The charade deepened. The dynamic of their relationship had shifted on its axis. Before the accident, Julian was the predator and Elias was the prey, a bird with clipped wings. Now, Julian was vulnerable, open, and affectionate, while Elias remained guarded, cold, and distant. It was a Tuesday evening when the cracks began to show. A storm was battering the coast, rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the dining room. They were eating dinner, something they hadn't done together in years. Julian was recovering well. He was walking with a cane now, the limp giving him a distinguished, albeit fragile, air. He cut his steak methodically, but his eyes were fixed on Elias. You've changed, Eli, Julian said softly. Elias didn't look up from his salad. People change, Julian. 5 years is a long time. Not just that, Julian said, putting his fork down. The sound of silver hitting porcelain echoed in the vast room. You flinch when I come near you. You don't look me in the eye. And you've taken off your ring. Elias froze. He had taken the wedding band off 6 months ago, throwing it into a drawer the night Julian had missed Elias's mother's funeral to close a deal in Tokyo. He hadn't put it back on, even for the charade. It was being resized, Elias lied, the excuse flimsy. For a month. Julian pushed his chair back and stood up. He limped around the table, the heavy thud of his cane marking his approach. Elias gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Julian, sit down. No. Julian stopped beside him. He didn't touch him, but his presence was a heavy, warm weight. I may have lost my memory, Elias, but I haven't lost my instincts. I know when you're lying to me. Something happened. Something broke us. And you're trying to protect me from it. I am protecting your life, Elias snapped, looking up. Stop digging. I don't care about my life. Julian's voice rose, a flash of the commanding so breaking through. I care about us. I woke up thinking I was the luckiest man alive because I had you. But every day, I watch you look at me like I'm a stranger. Or worse, like I'm a monster. The silence that followed was deafening. The thunder rumbled outside, shaking the glass. Maybe you are, Elias whispered, the truth slipping out before he could stop it. Julian recoiled as if slapped. The hurt in his eyes was raw, unguarded. It was a look the old Julian would never have shown. The old Julian would have sneered. This Julian looked shattered. What did I do? Julian asked, his voice barely audible. Eli, please, tell me. You forgot me, Elias said, standing up. Tears pricked his eyes, hot and angry. Long before the accident, Julian. You forgot me. You chose the company. You chose the power. You became cold, cruel. You missed my mother's funeral. You mocked my art. You told me I was nothing without the vain name. Julian swayed, his face draining of color. He gripped the back of Elias's chair for support. I said that. And more. Elias continued, the dam breaking. We aren't newlyweds, Julian. I filed for divorce the morning of your accident. I was leaving you. I am still leaving you. The revelation hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Julian stared at Elias, his chest heaving. The pain on his face was so visceral it made Elias want to look away, but he forced himself to hold the gaze. He wanted Julian to know. He wanted the charade to end. I see, Julian whispered. He didn't yell. He didn't rage. He simply looked defeated. I became my father. Elias didn't answer. He turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving Julian standing alone in the dark, supported only by a cane and the crushing weight of a past he couldn't remember but had to atone for. The following days were filled with a heavy, mournful silence. Julian retreated into his study. He stopped trying to initiate contact. He stopped the affectionate glances. He became a ghost in his own house, reading through old journals, emails, and business reports, trying to piece together the man he had become. Elias stayed in the blue room, waiting for the medical clearance to leave. But guilt, insidious and persistent, gnawed at him. He saw Julian limping in the garden, staring at the roses Elias had planted years ago, roses the old Julian had threatened to pave over. He saw Julian holding the old wedding albums, tracing Elias's smiling face. The climax came 2 weeks later. The Vane Corporation was hosting its annual charity gala. The board of directors, ruthless vultures who smelled blood in the water, demanded Julian's presence to prove he was still capable of leading. If he showed weakness, the stock would plummet. "You don't have to go," Elias said, standing in the doorway of the master suite. Julian was struggling with his cufflinks, his hands trembling slightly. Julian looked up. He looked tired. Dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes. "I have to. If I lose the company, the assets freeze. If the assets freeze, the settlement I owe you in the divorce will be delayed. I want you to have your freedom, Eli. I need to secure it for you." Elias felt a sharp pang in his chest. Julian was going into the lion's den not for power, but to ensure Elias could leave him comfortably. "Let me help," Elias said, stepping forward. He brushed Julian's hands away and fastened the obsidian cufflinks. His fingers brushed Julian's wrist, feeling the pulse hammering beneath the skin. "Thank you," Julian murmured. He smelled of sandalwood and rain, the scent of the man Elias had fallen in love with at university. "I'm going with you," Elias stated. "You don't have to pretend anymore." "I'm not doing it for the board," Elias said, looking up into those dark eyes. "I'm doing it because you're not him. Not right now." The gala was a glittering tank of sharks. Champagne flowed, diamonds sparkled, and whispers followed Julian and Elias like a poisonous vapor. Julian played the part well. He stood tall, despite the cane, his face a mask of polite indifference. But Elias, standing at his side, could feel the tension radiating off him. Then came Marcus Sterling, a rival CEO, a man who had tried to buy out Vane Corp for years. He approached them with a predatory grin, holding a glass of scotch. "Julian," Marcus drawled. "Good to see you standing. Rumor had it you were brain dead. Though, looking at your track record with your husband here, maybe you've been brain dead for years." The circle of socialites around them went quiet. It was a direct insult, a probe to test Julian's mental state. Julian's grip on his cane tightened. But before he could speak, Marcus turned his sneer to Elias. "And you, Elias, still hanging around? I thought you'd have cashed out by now. Or does he still have you on a leash?" The air crackled. The old Julian would have laughed or made a cutting remark about Elias's dependency. Julian stepped forward. He moved in front of Elias, shielding him with his body. He dropped the cane. It clattered loudly on the marble floor, but he didn't fall. He stood on his injured leg, ignoring the pain, towering over Marcus. "You will speak to my husband with respect," Julian said, his voice low, deadly, and vibrating with a cold fury that silenced the entire hall. "Elias is not on a leash. He is the only reason I am standing here. He is the only thing in this room that has any value. If you disrespect him again, Sterling, I won't just buy your company. I will dismantle it, brick by brick, and I will bury your legacy under the rubble. Do you understand?" Marcus paled, stepping back. It was a joke, Vane. "Get out of my sight," Julian commanded. As Marcus scrambled away, Julian's leg gave out. He stumbled, but Elias was there instantly, catching him. Elias's arm wrapped around Julian's waist, holding him up. "I've got you," Elias whispered, his heart racing. Julian looked at him, sweat beading on his forehead, pain etched in his lines. Did I do it right this time?" Elias looked at the man who had just defended him with a ferocity that terrified the room. This wasn't the monster. This wasn't the weak amnesiac. This was a man trying to rebuild a bridge from ashes. "Yes," Elias said softly. "You did good, Julian." They left the gala early. The drive home was silent, but it wasn't the oppressive silence of before. It was charged, heavy with unspoken things. Back at the penthouse, Elias helped Julian onto the sofa. He fetched ice for Julian's leg. As he knelt to apply the pack, Julian's hand came down, resting gently on Elias's hair. "My memory came back," Julian said. Elias froze. The ice pack dripped cold water onto the expensive rug. When Sterling insulted you, Julian whispered. The anger. It triggered it. I remember the funeral. I remember the arguments. I remember the night you signed the papers. Elias slowly looked up. So you remember who you are. I remember who I was, Julian corrected. Tears spilled from his eyes, tracking silently down his cheeks. I remember how much I hurt you. I remember thinking that love was a weakness, that I had to dominate everything to be safe. I was so afraid of losing control that I lost you instead. He slid off the sofa, ignoring his bad leg, kneeling on the floor in front of Elias. The great Julian Vane, on his knees. I don't expect you to stay, Julian choked out. I don't deserve it. You should go to Zurich. You should find someone who treasures you. But I needed you to know. The man who woke up in the hospital, the man who loves you more than his own life. That is who I want to be. That is who I am, if you'll let me. Elias looked at his husband. He saw the scars of the accident, but he also saw the scars of their marriage. He saw a man who had been broken open by fate, given a second chance to see the wreckage he had caused. Forgiveness wasn't a switch. It was a long, winding road. But as Elias looked into those obsidian eyes, he didn't see the ice anymore. He saw the fire. Elias reached out, cupping Julian's face. The divorce papers, Elias whispered. I'll sign them. Julian nodded, closing his eyes, leaning into the touch. I'll let you go. No, Elias said. Tear them up. Julian's eyes snapped open. We start over, Elias said, his voice trembling but firm. No more vain legacy. No more separate rooms. You court me, Julian. You and me back. You prove to me that the man in the hospital is the man who will stay. Julian let out a broken sob, burying his face in Elias's lap, wrapping his arms around Elias's waist like a drowning man finding shore. Elias stroked his hair, the bond between them fragile, cracked, but finally, undeniably real. And that is how the shattered mirror was forged into steel. If you enjoyed seeing Julian grovel and the power shift back to Elias, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who became a monster if he woke up remembering only his love for you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art. 2 men, BL, Yaoi, Man 1. Julian Vane, kneeling on floor, black tuxedo, disheveled, crying, holding the waist of Man 2, submissive desperation, sharp features, dark hair. Man 2. Elias Thorne, sitting on cream sofa, wearing elegant white silk suit, looking down with conflicted expression, hand gently touching Man 1's hair, soft lighting. Background is a dimly lit luxury penthouse living room. Rain against floor-to-ceiling windows, discarded cane on the floor, emotional atmosphere, cinematic lighting, sharp focus, intricate details.